911. What are you reporting?
We got someone or something crawling around out here.
Did you see what it was? Was it a person or an animal or?
I can't tell. All I know is that my central light came on and I just happened to glimpse and see this thing running across the yard. A good-sized man or something. It looks like a man. I don't know what it was. Just it ran across the yard.
Okay. You've had problems in the neighborhood before?
Yeah, my dog was killed here just recently. I don't know what it was. Whatever it is, it's running. I couldn't catch it if I was going to chase it. But whatever it was standing up. I'm out here looking through the window now and I don't see anything. I don't want to go outside. Jesus Christ, you better...
Sure.
Deal!
Hello?
Get somebody out here.
What's going on now, sir?
That son of a bitch is about 6'9", I don't know.
Do you see him now, sir?
Yes, I'm looking right at him.
Uh-oh. Okay, hang on.
He's right...
Is he in your yard, sir?
Yeah, God, he's big.
Okay, what's he doing in your yard?
He's looking at me.
Oh, and the guy is on foot.
I don't know what... It's a big... real big person. That's all I can say.
Okay, but it is a person.
Yeah, I'd say it was a person, somebody really big. But he's all in black.
From the haunted heartland in Omaha, Nebraska, welcome to the Necronomicast, where we bring you the horror of Hollywood and beyond. Beyond Bizarre is our destination for this late night conversation as I welcome to the show Timothy Renner. He's an author, a historian, illustrator, and folk musician who resides in Pennsylvania. He's documented hundreds of Bigfoot encounters in his series of books, including his recent Where the Footprints End. He hosts his own podcast and is a frequent guest on numerous radio shows, including Coast to Coast AM. Now we're going to talk about the high strangeness of our world and the dimensions beyond. UFOs, forest ghosts, fairies, goblins, Bigfoot, you name it. So dim the lights and settle in for a late night conversation with Timothy Renner here on the Necronomicast. From the land of high strangeness, Red Lion, Pennsylvania, our guest this evening for a late night conversation, author, musician, podcast host, historian, Timothy Renner. Timothy, how are you tonight?
I'm doing great. Happy to be here.
I'm super excited to have you on the show. I can't remember the first place I heard you. It was either the Sasquatch Chronicles podcast, maybe it was Coast to Coast, but I heard you and your stories and all the history that you've gone through researching the Bigfoot phenomenon. And I read your books immediately after that. And having you on the show is going to be a lot of fun. I don't even know where to begin.
Well, I mean, I'm excited to talk. Bigfoot is something I can talk about all day, but I grew up on horror movies too, so this is a cool place, cool meeting of the minds to be here.
Yeah, high strangeness indeed. Ever since I was a kid, I've been fascinated. I guess it started with watching the reruns of In Search of, Unsolved Mysteries, things like that. Books at school, the Patterson Gimlin film, when I started really getting interested in Sasquatch, Bigfoot. For you, what sparked your curiosity? Because you are a historian on it.
Yeah, that came later. I mean, I got into it like every other kid my age, probably. That was a monster kid in the 70s. I saw it on In Search of when I was very young. I was probably 6 years old, and saw the Patterson Gimlin film on In Search of, and one of my brothers said, yeah, that's a real thing. Bigfoot's, they say it's a real thing. And I got so excited because I was always very interested in what I would later know is folklore. But at the time I didn't know what it was. It was ghost stories and monster stories and neat stuff. And I always liked it, but I always really wanted to go to like the places that were real. That somebody said, oh, there's a haunted house down that road. Or, people have seen a ghost on that road. And I'd always have to go to the place. I'd always bug my parents to take me to the actual place because I just wanted to see the real stuff. So when I heard that, here's this monster, Bigfoot, that's supposedly real, and I'll go ahead and say I still think he's real, but probably in a different way than a lot of cryptozoologists think he's real. I do think it's a real creature. But in any case, when I was young, I didn't make those kind of distinctions. Someone said it was real, and I was just immediately fascinated, just immediately entranced by the idea of this creature. And went through elementary school, got every book I could out of the school library, which was probably one or two they had, and just read everything I could on it, and promptly forgot about it in my teenage years when I found girls in punk rock, but came back around as an adult.
It's kind of like a mirror image to my story, because in elementary school, there was one book in our school library, and I've even gone back on eBay and I've tried to do Google image searches for the cover, because I remember the cover of the book, and all the boys at school, 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, there was almost like a waiting list to check out this book, and we're like, does Bobby have it? Yeah, Bobby finished it, and then John checked it out. I'm like, God damn it, John checked it out. I gotta, we always were trying to get this one book on Bigfoot, and then like Leonard Nimoy, In Search of. The Patterson-Gimlin film. When I first saw that, I remember my dad was sitting in a chair in the living room, and we were watching it, and I saw that, and I'm like, oh my God, look, there it is. And my dad was kind of like, well, that's bullshit. And I'm like, but in my mind, I just couldn't dismiss it like that. And here I am, 40 years later, still reading books, still checking out things online. The internet's been such a godsend for going down rabbit holes of theories and information about Bigfoot. And I was into punk rock too. So, I mean, pretty amazing that we've got this connection here. In Pennsylvania. So you grew up in Pennsylvania there in Red Lion?
I grew up in northern Maryland, like a stone's throw away from Pennsylvania. And I moved to York County in my 20s.
Okay. So when you started researching and getting into Sasquatch and the legend of Bigfoot and everything, what like tripped your trigger? What was like the inciting thing that you saw that just started making you go down like this research avenue? Because your books are so I'm paging through it right now. It's story after story, and you spent hours and hours and hours and hours combining I guess your curiosity of Sasquatch and a discipline of research. What made you start writing books and following that path?
Well, there's kind of like three questions in one there. So my first...
Yeah, get used to it.
My first book is called Beyond the Seventh Gate. And I wrote that really as a response to I'm sure people have seen like the Weird USA series. They have one for every state, I think, Mm-hmm. So I had an article about an area called Hex Hollow or Ray Myers Hollow here in York County in that book. And they asked me to take pictures for another area called Toad Road. And Toad Road, there's been like a B horror movie made about it and so forth. And this is all before that. And Toad Road was one of those places when I moved here, I asked my wife, who is native to York County, where's the weird stuff? Where's the ghost stories? Where's the spooky stuff? And Toad Road was one of those places. And she had gone to day camp there. And the only legend she had heard, well, not at Toad Road, across from Toad Road, there was a YMCA camp across the Cadorus Creek from Toad Road. And she had gone to camp there in the 80s or late 70s, I forget which. But in any case, she said the only story she heard about it was don't look behind you on Toad Road. So that's the only information I had. Well, years later, I joined some kind of legend tripping group on, I think it was like Yahoo groups or whatever preceded that, mm-hmm. The old email groups, if you remember them.
Sure.
And there was a local group who were very well-meaning, but they never let the truth get in the way of a good story. And they declared that they found the real legend of Toad Road and came up with this incredible story that I'd never heard before about an insane asylum that was there that burnt down, and all the victims were killed in the fire, and those that didn't were running through the woods, and the townspeople were so afraid of them that they hunted them down and killed these insane asylum patients. And there's 7 gates to keep people away from the ruins of this asylum. and blah blah blah. I went on and on and on. It's just very like, and immediately my BS antenna was like, nah, I can't see that. So I just my father-in-law had these old maps, and I grabbed them and started looking, and they go back to the 1700s maps of the area. He's a genealogist. So he has, tons of these old maps. I'm just going through them and looking. There was never a structure back along what was Toad Road. And so immediately I called BS. I said, no, there was never an insane asylum back there. I'm sorry. And then they changed the story immediately to it being a mad doctor with a mansion that burnt down. And, same story otherwise.
Right.
And, I couldn't immediately prove that one wrong, but I kind of put it in the back of my head, like I want to figure out what's going on there someday. Well, in any case, the Weird Pennsylvania book comes out. They print my story with Hexal, and they said, can you take pictures of this Toad Road area? And I said, yeah, I will, but, please let me, you should probably let me look at the story you print before you print it, because there's a lot of nonsense out there on the internet. And the book was published, and they sent me a copy, and here's my photographs of the area right next to this BS story about an insane asylum burning down. And I immediately said, well, I got to fix this someday. And what started out as I was going to write just a magazine article, kind of correcting the falsities, and I realized soon after I was into it that it was going to be a book, and ended up writing a book, which is the true story of the area. There was never a insane asylum. There was never there was a doctor that lived near the end of it, and there was they call it an asylum, but they call it any place of medical rest in the up to the mid 1900s an asylum. Mm-hmm. So it was actually an old age home. It was not an insane asylum. That was in a town nearby that did burn down. So I think there's enough but no one was hurt, no one was killed, no one was even injured in the fire. But I think that was enough of a kind of a truth where that story kind of stuck. But the real story of the area is actually much creepier, and I started looking into it. I believe it has to do with there's a old iron furnace at one end. It's been there since Revolutionary War times, and there's a lot of paranormal activity associated with that. And indeed, almost every iron furnace I've ever come across has some kind of ghost story or paranormal activity associated with it. When I was doing research in the area, I stopped. There's someone who lived in the old ironmaster's house right by the furnace there. And he was out in his driveway one day, and I just walked up to him. I said, hey, tell me, where was Toad Road? And he showed me where it came out. And I said, did you hear any stories about Toad Road? And he's like, I never heard any stories about Toad Road. He said, all the ghost stories had to do with the furnace. I said, oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. But anyway, a lot of people did report strange things happening on this road, which was closed in 1973 after Hurricane Agnes. The thing about it is that none of these stories had anything to do with ghosts or gates or anything like that. And what people were reporting were screams in the woods and things following them through the woods and glowing eyes 8 feet off the ground and things like this. And things that if you're into cryptids, that's this is cryptid activity. This sounds like Bigfoot activity.
Sure.
And then I found an actual newspaper article from, I think, 74, of a guy who had parked his car out there and was attacked by a creature. I ended up tracking this guy down. The newspaper said he was attacked by a green-haired monster and sent to the hospital with scratches on his face. Well, this guy had no presence on the internet. I found him in a phone book and wrote him a letter, old-fashioned letter with a stamp, and asked him to please call me.
Sure. And
he called me, and he was completely shocked. He's like, what do you, I didn't think anybody, I haven't thought about this for years. But he told me a story. And he said, basically, his car had stalled when he was out there. It wouldn't turn on. Something kept brushing up against his car. And eventually, so much time passed, he said he couldn't sit there any longer. He didn't have cell phones back in the early 70s. So he got out of his car, and he said he started running. And he said, I ran right into what he called a monster. And he said, when I ran into it, it beat me up. He said it grabbed me and threw me to the ground. And he he had a head injury. He said, I was in the hospital for a week. It wasn't that like just sent there with scratches. He said, I spent a week in the hospital. And I asked him, I said, do you think it was Bigfoot? And he got very quiet. He got very, very quiet. And he said, I never thought about that. He's like, I guess it could have been. But he didn't like talking to me. I drew all this information out of him over the course of probably 5 phone calls. And the last time I talked to him, he said, my girlfriend does not like me talking to you because every time after I talk to you, he said, I wake up screaming with nightmares for about 2 weeks afterwards.
Wow.
And that was, he will not return my calls anymore. And I don't want to torment the guy and, like keep calling him when he doesn't want to talk. So that was that. But in any case, finding that article and talking to him kind of confirmed for me that it was cryptid activity in the area. And, like I said, I've been into Bigfoot, but I knew there were a few stories around. I'd heard a few accounts here and there, but then I really started digging in, and I found that, indeed, there are a lot of Bigfoot reports in the area, and that got me super psyched. But before I get on the subject of Toad Road, I want to turn back and say, in the course of doing all this historical research, there is a creature in Pennsylvania folklore that they call the hide behind. And they said that when going through the woods, this is it's obviously an English name, but it was the Europeans said that the Native Americans told them about this creature, and I guess that's the English translation of whatever the original Native First Nations name would have been for it. And so this creature, the hide behind, they said would follow you through the woods, and it would get the last person in line. And they said only the bravest should be the last person in line, because they could be relied on to never look behind them. And then it just clicked. It completely was like, that's the first thing my wife ever told me about Toad Road. Don't look behind you. And it just, kind of brought the whole thing full circle and made this kind of wonderful story of the whole quest. It started with don't look behind you on Toad Road. And I ended up digging up that bit of folklore, which just sort of matched the whole thing. And but in any case, I found so many of these reports of Bigfoot that I got interested, and I started going back into the 1800s when they called them wild men. They didn't start calling them Bigfoot till the 1950s,
Mm-hmm.
and I found tons and tons of reports in Pennsylvania. Excuse me. I plan on doing the whole country, region by region. I don't think most states don't have enough to fill a whole book. But to give you an example of how many reports I found in Pennsylvania, the second book I did was West Coast, and the Pennsylvania book is considerably thicker than the book for California, Oregon, and Washington State all put together.
Oh, is that right?
So, oh yeah. Now, part of that's due to Pennsylvania having more people to see whatever weird stuff, and in the 1800s, and more papers to report on stuff. But still, it's pretty interesting. I thought that, the West Coast is sort of known as the home of Sasquatch, and the Pennsylvania book is much thicker.
It's known because of the Pacific Northwest and some of these other, some of these big kind of, I call them kind of famous cases. But the Pennsylvania book, I was going through it, and like you were saying earlier, people didn't come up with the term Bigfoot. It wasn't a household word till after the 1950s or so, but there were stories of wild men and hairy giants, and you're right about ape man, things like that in your book Bigfoot in Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
I was just listening to your story, like every town's got like they don't have a Toad Road, but there's kind of urban legends and things. Like in our part of the woods, we had a thing about the old albino ranch, or the albino farm, and you don't go across Heartbeat Bridge and things like that. But I never heard any stories substantiated of anybody ever getting attacked or something like that. It's always kind of like stories to keep teenagers away from places so they don't hang out there and drink beer all night.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But that's interesting about the man who is obviously suffering from some PTSD.
I'm not a psychiatrist, but yeah, it certainly seemed like he did have PTSD from the incident. Yeah.
Sure. Amazing. with all these stories, and you're kind of finding things that are the same, consistencies with all these stories. What I'm finding out now, after reading a lot of books and just kind of as you progress through theories and different research about these things, is the different phenomenon that accompanies a sighting, or what they call it, maybe even a Class B encounter, where there's just sounds, knocks, smells, things like that, or footprints. But the weird things that happen around a Bigfoot sighting or an appearance, that's things that are highly interesting to me, like unexplained lights and even UFOs maybe being spotted before and afterwards. And one thing that I really appreciate about your research, and like the book that I was reading, your latest book, Where the Footprints End, is High Strangeness and the Bigfoot Phenomenon, Volume 1. How a lot of these things throughout history, these oral traditions, these stories that are passed down, even today we hear stories about lights, UFOs, and how you need to kind of broaden your approach to when you're thinking about cryptozoology. It's not just the unknown hominid in the woods. There's a lot more that goes around with it.
Yeah. And my first chapter in that book is really one of the big things that convinced me. I had two things that kind of shook me out of the Bigfoot is undiscovered ape kind of line of thinking, which I will say, like, I think that's probably a logical place to start. And I don't blame anyone for starting there. And I don't blame, like, if you're a hunter and you're in a tree stand and you see one walk by in the woods, or you're driving at night and you see one alongside the road, those people are always very firmly convinced they're just natural animals. I never blame them for thinking that way.
Sure.
However, I investigate cases, and I talk to a lot of people via my podcast and on the ground, boots on the ground investigations and so forth. And I can say 100% of the time, as far as my experience goes, when people have them on their property and have repeat encounters with them, when they encounter them, with frequency for whatever reason, weird stuff goes along with it. And between that and again, that the first chapter in that book is called The Company They Keep, and it's about 8 to 10 square miles, again in York County. This is in the southern part of the county along the river in Pennsylvania here, where I've found this like crazy number of Bigfoot sightings that occur within this 8 to 10 square miles that start in the 1800s and go on up to modern times. And accompanying these Bigfoot sightings, I also found ghost stories and weird stories about people having a seance and pirates sailing up the Susquehanna River and burying their treasure there, UFOs landing, nearby in nearby towns, and UFOs seen over the nuclear power plant in this, 8 square mile area. There's the nuclear power plant, and that in itself is odd, along with all these sightings. And I'm looking at the area, and the sightings are happening all times a year, and I'm thinking, like, what are these creatures like? There's not enough woods for them there. Like York County, we have some woods, we have even some forests, but none of it's wilderness. Wilderness is untouched land. There's not untouched land here.
Mm-hmm.
So where are these creatures breeding? If there's a breeding population of giant ape men here, where are they?
Right.
We should be seeing them more than we see them. It should be obvious. Their impact should be great as far as what they're eating. Their caloric needs would be absolutely massive. And it just doesn't. There's just no record of them, living here, having a breeding population here. So that was really, really strange to me. And some of the flesh and blood Bigfoot people said, well, they migrate through the area. Well, then it's on no set schedule, because these sightings happen all times a year. And again, since, from the 1800s until now. So that, and again, stories of weird lights and all this other stuff accompanying it made me really start thinking, like, well, this doesn't make sense. And it was actually my co-author of that book, Joshua Cutchin, I was talking to him about it, and he gave me the title for that chapter. And he said, "Tim, look at the company these things keep. It's never just Bigfoot. It's Bigfoot and UFOs and ghosts. And there's even a leprechaun story in the area. You know, it's just bizarre, just one bizarre story after the other. Haunted houses. I mean, you name it, all in, 8 square miles. It's like this, window area of strangeness down there. And that, kind of was one of the major things that made me think, okay, there's something strange going on with these things. It has to be more complex than an ape in the woods.
Yeah, I've heard John E.L. Tenney in a lecture or in a talk about, if you just study the tentacle, you miss the octopus. That's something that he says a lot. And there certainly is I don't want to say just in the Bigfoot community, but there's like almost an apprehension in the Bigfoot community, the UFO community, the ghost community, where they don't seem to interact very much or accept other theories. So many Bigfoot people, they think it's only this undiscovered primate, missing link, half human, half creature roaming the woods. And it's just flesh and blood. That's it. And anything else is, well, that's crazy. That can't be.
Right.
That makes no sense. Well,
right.
But if you start you're talking to somebody about that might have had a Bigfoot encounter, and they talk just about the Bigfoot encounter. Well, what happened a couple hours before that? Well, there might have been some strange noises, or some odors, or some lights, or different things that outside of seeing this 8-foot, 9-foot creature don't seem that strange. But you need to look at the entire picture of what's going on.
Oh, yeah.
And so like when UFO people say, well, no, it that has nothing. This is, they're beings from space, and they're coming here in their spaceship that they bolted together on another planet, and when you kind of cut off even just entertaining the idea of these things are kind of interconnected in a way. I mean, even in your book, you were talking about one thing I found super fascinating was, I don't know how to pronounce the word, but it was a combination of wilderness and poltergeist. How would you say that?
Yes, wildernessgeist.
Wildernessgeist. Incredible. And really made me think about spiritual or spirits in the forest. Incredible. Comparing poltergeists with Bigfoot phenomenon. Incredible.
Well, I had my own series of encounters with something in the woods that I was stacking rocks. So I'd found a bunch of white quartz that looked like it was smashed up one day,
mm-hmm.
and I stacked it into a cairn. It's in a place I hike quite frequently. Actually, it's in that place called Hex Hollow I was talking about before that I'd written about for the Weird Pennsylvania and Weird USA books, and stacked these rocks and came back like a week later, and the stack was changed, and I was like, oh, somebody changed that. I'm going to change it again, and I changed it, and came back, a week or two later, and it was changed. And I was like, okay, all right. So now I'm playing a game, and I'm thinking it's probably a person at this point. So I started visiting more frequently. It's like 10 minutes from my house or something, so I can get there quickly and easily. And I'm checking this cairn stack, this stack of stones, with great frequency. And every time I come, it's changed. It's changed, and I'm getting more complex. So I'm stacking them with more complexity. And every time I come, it's very simplified. It's simplified usually to like 3 stones in a triangle pattern. So I'm thinking, well, man, if I was a person and somebody did something complex, and I would match the complexity of it theirs, or do something, play with what they did. But every time it was just 3 stones in a sort of a triangle. Sometimes there'd be a stone in the middle and be 4 stones, 3 at the points of the triangle, and then 1 in the middle. But most often 3 stones in a triangle. This became really fascinating to me. And I was going on and on about it. And my wife is like, you're playing chess with somebody. She's jokingly calling it my chessboard. And I was like, well, that's fine. It's still interesting. And whoever it is, they're there as much as I'm there. So it's going on and on and on. And one day I'm there with my wife and my kids. And I said, hey, I'm going to run up to, by this point, it's known as my chessboard. I said, I'm going to run up to my chessboard. I'm going to change the rocks and come back. I'll meet you back down. And they wanted to go hike around this pond. So I'll meet you back down there. So I run up there. I change them around. I meet her back down on the other trail. And she says, oh, I want to go see your chessboard. I want to see where it is. I said, okay, let's go. So hike back up the hill, back up to it. And I've been going 15 minutes, maybe. And there's a big leaf placed under one of the rocks I had put there. Now, leaves don't fall under rocks. They just don't do it. And at this point, I'm looking around. I'm like, who is, like, I'm getting chills. I'm just looking like somebody had to see me do this and immediately change it. And like, are they hiding in the woods? Where are they? You know, I didn't see any other hikers there that day. There were no other cars in the parking area. And I'm completely fascinated. So I'm convinced something's going on. And this goes on and on. I think it started in the summer, and by that winter, it was in January, I was hiking there alone, and I've hiked there alone hundreds and hundreds of times, and, you know, no problem. I was completely familiar with the area. So there's no reason I should have a fear response at all. And I'm walking up to the area, and I hear what sounded like a rock clack behind me. It sounded like two rocks sitting together.
Mm-hmm.
And a wood knock in front of me answered that. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And there was a murder of crows sat in the trees there, and they would alert to me, but they were kind of used to me hiking the area. They would call when I came, but they'd never like freak out. And I just remember this day, they freaked out. The whole like murder of crows, the whole flock of them just came out of the trees right over top of my head. I could have hit them with my walking stick if I raised my walking stick. They were that low, and they were just screaming, just the whole bunch of them, which didn't seem, you know, just, I was like, oh, someone upset the crows at the time. It didn't, you know, until later that didn't strike me as anything to note. So I go up to the area where the rocks are, and I'm hit with this smell, this really bad smell of skunk and dead flesh. And I'm like, oh my God, what's that? And then it occurs to me, I know enough about Bigfoot sightings to kind of know what's coming. I'm like, oh man, you heard knocks, you got the smell, and you're about to have an encounter. And I got so scared. I don't think I've ever had a fear like this. My knees locked up. I stayed not out of bravery. My knees locked up, and I was leaning on my walking stick so I didn't fall. And I was completely terrified, wanted to run and couldn't. And I'm just having this internal dialogue with like, well, this is what you wanted. You know, you better prepare for it because it's happening. And then I heard 3 clicks, like metallic clicks. It sounded like gears clicking, like small gears, not big, just click, 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 from the same direction that I had heard the wood knock. And everything went away all at once. The smell went away. The fear went away. Everything went away. I was able to stack the stones and kind of look around a little bit. And I'm walking out, and in this light snow was a series, I think probably 2 or 3, what I call maybe footprints that came off a game trail. I can't say they weren't super defined because the snow was real. It was just a real light covering of snow, but they were human-shaped, big footprints, like probably 16 inches, something like that. Nothing you could cast, and nothing that would convince anybody that, you know, it was necessarily anything. Mm-hmm. But it certainly looked like, you know, these big human-shaped, you know, footprints that came off this game trail, across the trail I was on, and up into a cornfield. And sometime after this, I was talking to, again, my co-author, Josh, and the host of the Where Did the Road Go podcast, Soraya. I was on Where Did the Road Go, and I was telling the story. And I was convinced this was a Bigfoot encounter. You know, I said, you know, like, this was, you know, pretty much a Class B Bigfoot encounter. And those guys stopped me, and they said, well, no, you didn't see Bigfoot, so you can't say that. And I said, what? You know, because, you know, everything I've read, this is all Bigfoot stuff. And they said, no, you didn't. If that happened in a house, you would call that poltergeist activity. All of this stuff has happened as regards poltergeist activity in houses. The bad smells, the footprints even, the knocking sounds, all of that, the feeling of fear, all associated with poltergeist. And it was really like a smack upside the head when they said that. And I went, oh my goodness, you're right. I can't call that big. I don't know what it was. And that was the other thing that, you know, and that was kind of the genesis of this wilderness geist idea, this wilderness poltergeist, for Josh, you know, as we were talking about that. And So that's the other event that kind of convinced me that that's, something else might be going on with this phenomenon.
Yeah, that's super interesting, because when you were going through, now I've read where the footprints end. I've read a lot of books from Hans Holzer too, and like when you were talking about poltergeist phenomenon, the rapping, not hip hop, but the knocks or the smells, the odors, and the fear, like you were almost sensed. Maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, but you had some fear, obviously.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But did you feel disorientated? Did you feel like maybe you were a little out of sorts from the whole situation? Like something was affecting you that way, not like body chemistry and fear and adrenaline. But did you feel like maybe, because a lot of times you hear, people.
It was hard to sort like the fear from the flight or flight, reflex, and I definitely felt like I wanted to sit down, but at the same time, I wanted to run, and it was confusing in that sense,
Yeah, it's never really when I read these things, it's never really like a calming presence or anything like that. It's usually something that instills a sense of dread in somebody.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Often, yeah. It's I tell people, as regards everything like paranormal, it's whatever is behind all this, and I just kind of call it all like the other. It's some kind of otherness that's behind all of this. I think it's very capricious, and it can change on a dime, and it can go from playful to scary and frightening and even dangerous. If you break the rules, and I have before, it can get quite literally dangerous, I feel, depending on the way things go. So it's nothing to play around with, but it is extremely fascinating, and I can't blame anyone at all for being interested and wanting to have these experiences.
Yeah, when you were saying, this is anything you don't want to play around with, and you might have broken some rules, do you think, going back to you called it chessboard, or do you think you were communicating in a way, like maybe there was maybe arranging the rocks in a certain way was in a pattern that was? Oop, are you there?
Hello.
Hey, what happened?
I don't know.
They didn't like us. They didn't like us playing around. I know.
Yeah,
I know exactly where I was leading with this. Do you feel like maybe perhaps like with this chessboard in the woods, that with you were communicating with some kind of creature, entity, the other, and maybe just arranging the rocks in a certain way was unlocked something, or maybe sent a message, and they were coming to warn you, or they were gonna, you know what I mean? I just wonder, like, we were looking at rocks and maybe we don't understand, arranging them in a certain way might mean something to somebody with other sensibilities.
Well, I'll tell you the continuation of that story. So this continued on after that experience, and I never had that experience of fear again. I never heard anything else or saw anything else, but the rocks continued to change until one day I cut myself on the quartz rocks were very sharp,
mm-hmm.
and I cut myself on it, and I bled all over the rocks. It was a really bad cut, and I thought, oh, this is really going to amp it up. Now, now I have blood on them. This thing should go crazy now. Let's see what happens with this. So I restacked them, even though my blood was all over them. And that was the end of it. They never changed again for me after that. So very, very strange. I thought it would amp up after that. I thought, but that was it. That was the end of it at that location. Similar, another place in the same area, I found off trail a stack of very large rocks, very, very large rocks, in the crotch of a tree, like way too, like I can't even lift them. They're like that heavy that someone or something had placed there. And I thought, well, I'm going to start stacking rocks here and see what happens. Now this was different because now I would add to this, and every time I've added to this, it's been knocked back down to its original 3 rocks or whatever is in the crotch of that tree. So I can add whatever I want to it. I was there this spring with a friend of mine who's very, very strong. And he said, let's see if people are doing this. And he picked up this massive, what I would call a boulder. I mean, this guy's like a bodybuilder. He just picked up this massive rock and put it on top there. And there's no way I could lift that. No way. And he put it on top of those, and he's like, now we'll see if this changes back. And I went there about a month later, and it was that huge rock was nowhere to be found. Nowhere to be found. It was down to the original 3 rocks. So, and that's my experience of this area over and over. But I amped up the game. I started leaving food. And, the food would be gone. And you go, well, it's probably, raccoon got it, squirrel got it, whatever. But still, and I had heard stories of people asking for things. And now one day I had asked out loud for antlers. It's crazy. This stuff is all absolutely nutty. I realize this, but I'm open to trying this stuff. So I had read, my friend Mike Clellan has a book called The Messengers. It's about owls and as they relate to the alien abduction experience. In that book, there's a woman who said that all she has to do is ask out loud to see an owl, and that she will see an owl that day. I thought, well, that's interesting. Sounds a little new agey. I'm not above trying it, though. I didn't necessarily want to see an owl. I wanted to find antlers. So I asked out loud. I said, I would like antlers today. I've collected animal skulls since I was a little kid. I'm an artist. I like drawing them. Mm-hmm. I will say I like them when I'm not into gore. So if they're not sun bleached and clean, I leave them. So, but I thought, well, yeah, it'd be cool to find some antlers. I'm going to ask for antlers today. So I would like to find some antlers. I walk off into the trail, and I'm heading up to that chessboard area, and I see something in the tree right off the trail. Is blowing in the tree, and I think somebody has put a bag of trash. Like sometimes people will change their kids' diapers and leave them in a bag there, or even pick up their dog mess. And I thought, oh man, somebody left a bag of trash, and I do try to clean up as I go along. I feel it's something I can do as much as I use the natural spaces around here. If I find garbage, I try to pick it up. So I'm thinking this was a bag of some sort of garbage hanging in the tree that I have to now deal with. So I go off trail to find what this was, and I'm completely knocked on, senseless by this. It was the entire tail section of an owl, not just one feather. The entire tail section of an owl had been impaled onto this tree. So here I was reading this book on owls, and this woman asked for owls. I said, well, I'm going to ask for antlers. I asked for antlers. I get an entire owl. It's a barn owl tail section, so it's bright white. It's actually quite beautiful. But the entire tail of an owl. I'm just like, what is this? Why? Owl, and so this proceeds, and I'm leaving food in this new area, and I amped it up again. I started leaving alcohol because I'm reading stories about spirit gifting, and
you're leaving alcohol.
Yeah, I started leaving alcohol. I was leaving little bottles of wine.
Wow.
And
okay.
I left a little bottle of wine in the tree one day, and asked for a skull. So I said, I'm gonna now that I'm leaving gifts and they're disappearing, the food's disappearing. But I said, well, I'm gonna kick it up a notch. I'm gonna leave alcohol, which is a traditional spirit offering, and I'm going to ask for a skull. So I said, I want to find a skull. Please, let me have a skull. So
let me interrupt you real quick, and I hate to do that, but I'm just kind of forming this in my mind. So you leave a little gift, and are you asking out loud? Just
oh yeah.
Are you saying it just out, like, please bring me a skull, or is there some kind of not like a chant or a ritual? I mean, are you just asking in plain English, like, hey?
Literally just asking the woods. Just left it.
All right.
So there's a little hole in the crotch of this tree, underneath these stones, where I could drop it in. That I could see it down in there, but my hands couldn't reach it. A child's hands probably could, but mine couldn't. And I think you'd have to know it was there.
Sure.
But I drop it in there, and I just said to the woods, I would like a skull, and I would like to find a skull. I believe I just said, like, that was probably the exact quote. As foolish as that makes one feel, but I was alone, and I'm just willing to try this stuff. And I walked, maybe a quarter mile from there up into a field, and I noticed this circle of trees in this field that I'd never explored before. And all the times I'd been there, never explored it. And I went, oh, why have I never been in there? It's like maybe a half-acre size circle of trees. I've never looked in there. I'm going to go in there. And I go inside this circle of trees, and inside is a large mound of stones, pretty tall. And if this was in Ireland, it would be what they call a fairy fort. This is, I've been told there are no fairy forts in America because we don't have them. But if this was in Ireland, that's what it would be. They would be called a fairy fort. A large, stack of rocks surrounded by trees, which is associated with supernatural activity in Ireland. But in any case, I'm looking at this. I'm like, well, I'm going to climb to the top of that. It wasn't a mountain or anything. It was just a big stack of stones. But I'm going to go up there and see what I could see. I'm making my way up, and I start noticing little tufts of hair on the ground. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And then, a few steps later, I look down and I see a freshly killed groundhog head. Just the head. There's no sign of the body anywhere around. The jaw had been ripped off, and it was just laying there. And it hit me immediately. Like, you asked for a skull. You got a skull. You didn't say, like, I want a nice, clean, old skull. You got a brand new skull.
Right. And
it freaked me out. And I backed out. I literally backed out of the place because I'm like, what the heck is going on? And cut through the field and ended up basically at the chessboard area. I realized that the trees, that circle of trees, is where I had heard the wood knot come from that day that all that other stuff happened. So, I'm like, and I'm dazed at this. I'm like, wow, you asked for a skull, you got a skull. What's going on with that? And kind of left and came back a couple times by myself, a couple more times. The next time I looked for that little bottle of alcohol, it was gone. And I was like, oh, wow, that's interesting. It's not in there. It was just a little glass bottle with a cork. And then it came back again, and it was back there. I could see it again. Now, I don't know what that is. I don't know if something's moving it around inside the tree or what, but very, very strange. Every time since, by the way, it's been gone. Every time it's not reappeared. But I came back with my son one day, and this is probably the third time I'd been since the groundhog head. The night before, I had been talking with someone, and we'd been talking. I was on a podcast, and we were talking about Seth Breedlove's Small Town Monster series. I don't know if you've seen that series of documentaries.
No, I haven't.
Seth Breedlove is the director. Very unusual name, Breedlove. There's not a lot of Breedloves around in this area at all. I parked at an area called the Crossroads parking lot. So it starts at a crossroads, very important in supernatural things. Walking through the woods with my son, and we're looping back. We've done our hike. We're looping back, and he's in much better shape than I am. So he's usually hiking about 30 to 50 yards ahead of me. And I see him stop, and he kind of straightens up. I can tell he's looking at something. So I catch up to him. I said, what do you see? He's like, is that a raccoon up there? I said, oh, yeah, that is. And he takes a step towards us. I said, no, we're not. We're going to take another trail. Raccoons shouldn't be out during the day. And as soon as he turns around, I see this thing start just running towards us, growling and hissing and snarling. And so I said, run. I told him to run. I took a few steps and realized I'm not outrunning this thing. So luckily I had my walking stick with me, and pure luck, not skill, I guess. I don't know. I killed it with the first blow. I think I broke its back. It never got to me. It never touched me. But I had open cuts on the legs. It was rabid. I had to get rabies shots and go through the whole thing. In any case, I go back to the parking lot and call the park ranger. I think I figure they want to know when something is, when an animal attack happens, they probably want to know about it. So I call the park ranger. They said, we'll be there in a minute. I should mention that previous on that podcast we were talking about dealing with the supernatural. And we were talking about how it's very much like the Eye of Sauron. When you put on the ring, you get, it's like the eye focuses on you. You get its attention.
Sure.
So when you start playing around with it, it's very responsive in that sense. And I had jokingly said that to my son, my only regret is I didn't yell, "You shall not pass," when I brought my staff down upon this thing, referencing the Lord of the Rings without thinking about the night before we had been talking about that. Anyway, get back to this Crossroads parking lot, what it's called, and who shows up but a Ranger Breedlove. He's got Breedlove on his name tag, and I'm just like, what the heck? And it was just too many synchronicities at once that just freaked me out. And I'm trying to piece together, what does this mean? I've been hiking, 45 years and never been attacked by anything. I spent my entire childhood in the woods and never got attacked by an animal. And then this happens. And well, in the course of researching where the footprints end, I came across a lot of folklore from the Germanic and Norse, and they talk about how to deal with these land spirits. That they call them land wights or earth wights. And one of the rules is you don't ask for things, but if you do ask for something and they give it to you, you better take it. It's a great offense to the land spirits if you don't take something that you've asked for and they've given you. And when I read this, I thought back to the whole thing with the groundhog head, and I said, I think I broke the rules. And I just can't help. I mean, maybe it's all coincidence, but to me, it just all felt so weird with so many synchronicities and coincidences around this raccoon attack that I just thought I just couldn't help but feel like something is all tied together. It felt like that. It just felt weird. The whole event felt very, very strange to me. So yeah, there are rules, and I suggest people don't even enter into it. But if you do, be careful and keep it lighthearted and don't break the rules. The rules in folklore are pretty explicit. I broke them, and I feel like I got my butt smacked.
Yeah, what a story! I take copious notes when I'm having these conversations, these late night conversations with guests, when they're telling these interesting stories. And I circled twice around it because I was going to ask you if you felt like somehow you disrespected the forest, the creature, the spirit of whatever was out there. If you felt like you disrespected it by not taking the offering that it was giving you in exchange for the alcohol.
Yeah, I think absolutely. I mean, I believe there's a lot to folklore. Is our ancestors' way, and oftentimes of dealing with this strange stuff. And there's a lot of wisdom there. And I give the example often, I sing a lot of traditional folk songs. There's a lot of good information in that. There's a lot of true stories in these songs that have been passed down over the years. And there's a story in the traditional, or rather saying in the traditional folk song world that, bad song doesn't get to become traditional. And I feel like that's true. And, folklore is also part of the folk process. And these stories get handed down and they get exaggerated. They get changed a little bit. And, maybe the details get twisted a little bit, but the essential truth, I think, goes along with it. And, a lot of folk stories will tell you, what plants will heal you, what plants will kill you, what's good for this and what's good for that. And I think these folklore stories of these weird creatures, that was our ancestors' way and story of telling us, this is how you deal with these things. And it's expressly noted, like I said, in the folklore, don't ask for stuff, but my goodness, if you do and you get it, you better take it. And I really do. I feel like I offended, I don't know if you want to call it a genius loci or the, land spirit or whatever it was. I really got the feeling that I offended it, and I was punished for it. That was like a warning shot. Again, the raccoon never touched me, but I did end up, getting gravy shots, and really adjusted my thinking about the whole process of, maybe for the better, I guess. I take it a lot more seriously now. And I certainly, I don't know. I've been left stuff since I feel, I didn't realize how crazy. I'm usually on paranormal podcasts where this stuff doesn't sound so crazy, so I don't know how crazy this sounds either to you, this kind of stuff. But I can tell you on Bigfoot investigations and paranormal investigations, I am finding an inordinate amount of skulls. Probably 75% plus of the investigations I go on, I will find skulls, clean skulls, left out in the open. I'm not crawling around in the bushes digging for them. Like I said, I collected them my whole life. Since starting doing paranormal investigations, I found one on Toad Road one day that was impaled on a branch about eye level. And ever since finding that one, I found so many it's just incredible. It's the number of skulls I have probably tripled at least since that time. And again, I've been collecting my whole life. I find them constantly to the point where I just start laughing when I find them on investigations now. Even down to we were doing an investigation, like it was actually just supposed to be a ghost investigation of this haunted area in Maryland. But we're traipsing through the woods of this property that was associated with this. Again, he was associated with an iron furnace. He was like the cruel iron master. There's often a story of a cruel iron master with these iron furnaces. And here I am traipsing through the woods behind the property that this guy owned in the 1700s. And I'm not on a trail. I'm just going through the middle of the woods. And I looked down and I found a plastic Halloween skull. And I just started laughing. I was like, I guess they couldn't give me an animal skull today, so they gave me a plastic skull. Well, we did more research on this guy, the guy whose ghost was supposed to haunt the place, this Iron Master. And a story about him says he dressed up like a ghost and would scare his neighbors. And I didn't even put this together. One of my podcast listeners said, how appropriate was that? This guy dresses up like a ghost and you find a plastic Halloween skull in the woods. And that, it really kind of hit me. Wow, doesn't that kind of go along with his story? Yeah.
Did you pick it up? I mean, somebody left it there for you, Tim.
Yeah, I keep all this stuff. I actually picked that up and I painted it, and one of the podcast listeners bought it. So I did kind of I don't know if you're familiar with the Hallstatt skulls in Austria, the painted skulls. That's kind of memento mori. I did one for Lee Master was the name of the guy whose ghost was supposed to haunt it. So I did it as a Lee Master memorial skull.
Amazing.
And painted up. But yeah, usually I just grab them and keep them. I found most recently I hiked that Toad Road, that closed road, every year. And I was with my investigation partner. I said, hey, you want to go on the hike with me this year? He said, yeah, definitely. So we're out there and we come across a Mylar balloon, which is a whole other thing. If people watch Hellier, Mylar balloons are a thing. Hellier's a paranormal series.
Sure. Yeah, it's over with Greg Newkirk and those guys.
Yeah. And I've actually did some soundtrack music for that. The episode 10 of season 2 is mostly my music in the soundtrack.
Oh, nice. I haven't started season 2 yet.
Oh, it amps up. It definitely gets more intense than season 1.
Excellent.
But in any case, we find this Mylar balloon, which is another thing we've been finding. And 10 steps later, if that, maybe 3 steps later, I look down and I see a skull. I'm like, just sitting there. I'm like, whoa, wow, look at that. That's a weird looking skull. And I pick it up. It's a pig skull. And it immediately hits me like, well, wait a minute. What's a pig skull doing? We don't have wild pigs in York County. There's no farms in this area. This is, out in the middle of the woods. And then it hit me that, boy, there's this, in collecting weird stories in the area, I found this old newspaper article about these kids who were butchering pigs in the area. And the revolver the kid had, this is from like 1907 or something, the revolver fell out of his pocket and shot and killed him.
Oh.
And the pig skull had a bullet hole right in the forehead. And I'm like, what the heck? And it said they had butchered one, and then they were getting ready to butcher the other, and the revolver fell out or whatever of his pocket. It's a very old skull. I don't know how to date them. It just looks very old. That's all I can say.
Mm-hmm.
And so we walk up, to the end of the road, and we walk back, and we're going in the other directions. We're now 10 steps in the other direction from this Mylar balloon, the same exact area. And Chad, my investigation partner, says, look over there. Is that another skull? And I looked over, and right alongside the trail is another pig skull. I was like, my God, like I've never found pig skulls in the woods here. Never. And then there's this whole story, with the area, this been slaughtering pigs, at least 2 of them there. And, the question is, like, are these the skulls? I don't know, but it's very interesting that there's a, pig skull with a bullet hole in the forehead.
Gosh,
small caliber.
Either that or you've got some kind of supernatural stalker,
Yeah, I don't know, but, and the pigs, the skulls go home with me because it's too incredible to, and it blows my mind every time. It's like, wow, but
it's
yeah.
weird.
So it continues. This weird stuff continues as regards to this. I think it's an interactive phenomenon.
Well, and it's weird how these phenomenon and how these things are revealed to us. Earlier you were talking about. Folklore and things like that. And, a lot of times, like with these oral traditions that have been passed down for centuries, they're interwoven within a story to help teach some kind of morality tale. And also, like you said, like along the line in societal evolution, they learned don't eat this bark, or they made a tea out of this and it had medicinal properties, and stories, legends, folklore kind of evolved to kind of teach one way or another, what to do, what not to do, with lessons and things like that. I say this real carefully, but even if you go to the Bible, there's biblical myths, there's stories, that are written in a way that are meant to teach a story, or teach a lesson through a story. There are such things as biblical myths and things like that. Absolutely incredible. I love hearing like your personal experiences with these phenomenon. And that's why every time I've heard you on other shows, I just always found it super fascinating the way that you kind of relate a story and kind of absorb a story and think about it and kind of process it and tell it to everybody. When going through your books, there's some really scary stories in there. Have you ever found a story in your research that just made you, I don't know, take your glasses off and like rub your eyes and like, oh my God, I can't believe what I just found? Are there stories that have just absolutely shocked you about Bigfoot or things like that you've kind of put into a book?
Yeah, I mean, there's one of my favorite stories in the Bigfoot in Pennsylvania, the historical one, is about a kid who it's a repeat visit of the creature to this farm, and the kid's been seeing the creature around, and he took a shot at it. He fired he was out hunting one day, I think, and saw it, and he shot it. He and his father tracked it by the blood and never found it. And a few nights later, his father was chopping firewood out at night by the light of a lantern or a fire, I forget which. And they saw this creature. And the kid ran in the house to get the gun and came back out, and the creature attacked him, broke his arm. And I think they said the father somehow ran the creature off or something. But there's a follow-up article where a reporter comes and basically is trying to get to the bottom of the story. Is this true or not? And it takes this kid out at night and said the kid, was seeing the creature everywhere. And, obviously the kid was, it was a fantasy because the reporter didn't see the creature. And I'm thinking, like, if you were like a 12-year-old kid and you had your arm broken by something, and somebody takes you outside at night, yeah, you probably are going to see this creature everywhere. I mean, it's, I was attacked by a raccoon, which is completely normal. And, for a while I was seeing raccoons every time I went out at night, around every corner, there's a damn raccoon, so I'm thinking if he really did get attacked by something, like, especially a little kid, of course he's going to be terrified of, the dark for a while. But, in any case, this was part of, what the 1920s, what they called the gorilla flap in Pennsylvania. There was sightings all across the state. But it's a very interesting story because this is to me, I hear, I listen to a lot of Sasquatch Chronicles and a lot of, I'm just a fiend for Bigfoot witness reports. I just love them. And, you hear this a lot when people shoot at them, they'll often follow them home and they'll exact some sort of revenge. They'll, either beat on their walls or, people say they climb on the roof, which is another interesting folkloric thing. As I was doing all the folklore research for Where the Footprints End, I'm absolutely stunned by the number of these creatures from folklore that, for whatever reason, they say walk on people's roofs or climb on people's roofs. But, modern Bigfoot witnesses also say that they will climb on their roof for whatever reason and run around on the roof or stomp on the roof and so forth. But so you have this sort of confirmed thing that these other reports have. Likewise, people shoot them all the time and either to no effect or it just doesn't kill them for whatever reason. So it's this kind of mirroring of the modern reports and these old reports. And I'm absolutely sure I have the advantage of online digital archives and being able to go to historical societies and source these articles and so forth that people just haven't had until very recently. So I'm very confident that modern Bigfoot witnesses were not reading these old newspaper articles to decide how these creatures should behave. What I'm confident what happened is what people were describing back in the 1800s is the same thing people were describing today, and the people today did not read those old newspaper articles. They weren't around until people like me started digging them out and publishing them. So there were a few, like the Bigfoot researchers in the 60s and 70s found a few of these old reports, but they just didn't have the resources that I have, the ability to search these archives. So I found, tons more that were just never published. So I'm entirely certain that modern witnesses were not reading these old reports. They just weren't available. So the fact that they're describing, these same things in these old reports that people are reporting today is one of the things that convinces me that whatever they're talking about the same thing. It's the same phenomena that they were experiencing back then that people are today. But yeah, that one was pretty shocking. And of course, the one I mentioned before, the guy on Trode Road, I mean, just having talked to him, that was pretty moving because you could tell, whatever he experienced something. And my wife's a pretty big skeptic, but she's been to some of these, conventions with me to help me at the table and stuff. And I had a guy come up and describe seeing a Littlefoot, what they call like a little person. Some people say they're juvenile Bigfoot, but they're never seen with the parents. So I think they're separate entities, whatever they are. Around here, we call them Albatwitch. And I had been in a newspaper talking about, this. We have a little convention here every year, the Albatwitch Day, we call it, that celebrates the little person. It's kind of like the Mothman Festival, kind of our local version of that.
Yeah.
And I was in the newspaper talking about it, and this guy came up. He actually lives in the same town I live in, and he's holding this newspaper. He's asking for me. He's like, "Where's Tim Renner?" Because I was quoted in this article, and he proceeds to tell me the story about seeing this creature when he was a little kid with his brother, and it was less than 5 miles from my house, probably 2 or 3 miles from my house as the crow flies, where he saw this thing in a field. And he said it was just standing there. He said it was so strange. He said it was, like he was 8 years old. He said it was about their height. And it was just standing there. He said it had its eyes closed. And he said the feeling he got with it was like, it was like a little kid where it's like it had its eyes squinted shut, like, you can't see me, you can't see me. He said my brother walked right up to it, and got in his face and was looking at it. And I told my brother, run. And he said, I never knew what it was. He said, years later, he had another, as an adult, he saw one run across the road again, right outside of town here. And, but he was shaken up. I really, really, tried to get him to come on the podcast, and his daughter was with him, and she's like, I just wanted him to come and talk to somebody that would believe him, and he said, I didn't know these things had a name. I didn't know what they were. And when he left, he got done telling a story. That's what he wanted to do, and he left. And my wife turned to me, big skeptic, and she said, I don't know what he saw, but he saw something. And looking in people's eyes, these witnesses and stuff, that's I truly believe them. I believe that, they experienced something very, very moving. And that was the case with Michael, the guy who was attacked. That I talked about at the beginning of this interview. He was very moved by it. He was very, very, very upset, and certainly carried it with him his whole life.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing. I really love listening to these different theories and stories, because these stories have been going on for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. And you were talking about, like, for doing research in your book with the digital archives and people not being able to go back or having the opportunity to go back and kind of read and kind of make up things. Native Americans have had these stories for centuries. People all over the world have had stories. A lot of them are told in your book, Where the Footprints End. People aren't just crazy. People aren't just lying. People aren't just trying to get attention. And when you see these people, or you read these stories, and when people are totally, it shakes them to their core, or, it changes their lives, you can't help but it lends to their credibility. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. And again, I talk to witnesses every week on my podcast, and I if they're nearby, I try to meet them and talk to them. I often will, try to convince people to, if they've had a sighting, in a park or something, or wherever it is, meet me at the place you saw it, because I want to be there, and I want you to show me, where it was and what you saw, and et cetera.
Yeah.
But the number one reason, like, people won't come on the podcast, for instance, like, say a witness will talk to me, but I said, well, will you come on the podcast and tell your experience? The number one reason I get is, people think I'm crazy. I don't want people to think I'm crazy. And they're aware of how these things sound, and they're aware of what society thinks of people who report these things. So, yeah, they're not lying. They're not looking for attention. That's often people say, oh, they're looking for attention. They're trying to get rich. I don't know anybody who's gotten rich. If you're trying to get rich off of Bigfoot, you're in the wrong, you're looking in the wrong area. Cause,
right.
I don't know, witness, author, filmmaker. I don't know anybody who's gotten rich off of Bigfoot. So that's one of the, they're just trying to get, how could a witness possibly, like, monetize their account? That's silly. But the other thing is, like, oh, they're just looking for attention, and absolutely not. Most people, at least 50% of the people that come on the podcast want their name changed. They'll agree to come on only if, you change their name and change the location of where it happened, because they don't want to be identified. Other people, won't come on at all. It's like, no, I'm afraid somebody recognizes my voice. I just don't want that. So they want to tell their story, like that guy who came up to the convention. That's all he wanted. He wanted to tell a story to someone who would believe him, and peace out, and that's it. And I gave him my card and begged him to call me, and told him, I had a million follow-up questions, and that was that. Never heard from him again. He wanted to tell a story and have someone believe him, I think, and that was that.
Yeah.
But yeah, whatever's happening, people are seeing something. And again, I think it's very real, whatever they're seeing. I think it does leave footprints. I think it can reach out and touch you. I believe Michael got attacked, but I also believe it's very, very strange. Whatever it is, it's not a monkey. That's all I can say. It's very, very complex and very strange.
It is very complex, and it is very strange. I was thinking about, even when at the beginning of this conversation, you were talking about what led up to writing the book Don't Look Behind You, and that whole tale of when you're in the group. What was it what you said? You put the strongest in the back? Is that what you said?
They said the bravest should be the last in line, because the idea was that the bravest could be relied not to look behind them. The idea was, if you look behind you saw the hide behind you, get so terrified that you get snatched up and taken and never seen again.
Well, the first thing I thought of when you were talking about that is some of the works from David Paulides, when he was talking about, people take their eyes off of their child, or people are whatever, they're walking on a trail or something like that, and they're out of sight just for a second, and they completely vanish. Now, I'm not saying it's Sasquatch or anything like that, but just the whole, the legend of don't look behind you. This phenomenon of people missing in national parks is a real thing.
Oh yeah, a number of his cases were. I mean, the last in line is a thing. It's one of the things that one of the factors in a number of the cases that he collected. There were people either first or last in line.
Yeah, somebody just is like, "Well, I'll meet you over at this rock," and as soon as they turn the corner, they're gone. They're gone. They never, and they either never see them again, or they're found. Not to go through his work, but they're found miles and miles away, weird circumstances, change in weather, all that stuff. People that are familiar with his work, and it's just incredible how it's all tied to kind of together. And it's just a huge mystery.
I mean, and there's a lot of folklore that could be applied to those accounts, including, a lot of accounts they find people's clothes neatly folded. I mean, they don't find the people.
Yeah.
But the clothes are inside out. Now, one of the ways that you could deal with fairies, now when you say fairies, people think of Tinkerbell, but I'm talking about like the old idea of fairies, which could be, trolls or giants or elves or any number of like supernatural creature was the term fairies.
Yeah.
And if you felt you were being like led by the fairies, one of the ways you could snap out of it, and this is in many cultures, many European cultures, was to turn your clothes inside out. It's a bizarre thing, but and these missing 411 cases, they're finding these people's clothes full, and often they're inside out.
Or years,
and it's just this
or even
weird little detail.
Yeah, or years later, they find like their shoes, and they haven't been like weathered by being out in the forest for years. Things like that.
Right.
It's crazy. It's absolutely bizarre. Yeah. And it's real. I mean, that's real documented, real missing people. I mean, and this isn't just people making stuff up. This is in police reports or highly researched. It's amazing.
Oh yeah, berry picking. He has a huge number of accounts where people were berry picking. Well, that was in folklore again. You'll find story after story of them saying like berry picking is where you're going to find the wild man, or you'll find the elves or whatever it is while you're berry picking. I mean, it's just a strange detail, but I mean, someone could probably do what I did with the Bigfoot folklore and do a missing 411 and folklore book. Kind of combine the folkloric elements and kind of write that book.
The mysteries of this planet will never be solved.
Yeah. I mean, they've been with us the entire time. It's like this wild man phenomenon that we call Bigfoot. It's been with us. Every culture has one. Like so this is a wild man that lives in the wilderness next to the civilization. It's always been there.
Oh,
that's why they're all over the world. Every culture has one.
Every culture for hundreds of years, not connected by the internet and wires of infinity. I mean, these things have been part of the human experience since. There's cave paintings of wild men and beasts like this.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. It's always lived next to us in the woods, whatever it is. As time goes on, I become more fond of this Jungian archetype idea. It's difficult to talk about because I'm a folklorist. I'm not a psychologist. And likewise, I think it gets into this weird area where people think, well, this is an archetype. It's not real, and I have to stress again and again. No, these are very real. Like people are seeing something very real. It just happens to, be this archetype idea that I don't know if we manifest it, as humanity in general. Like, do we manifest this thing like almost like a tulpa or something of that nature, or is it something outside of us that corresponds? It's reactive to us again, to our psyches in some way. I had a witness on the podcast recently who, I think this is a wonderful example. He tells a story of, he grew up in, he was in Washington or Oregon, I forget which, but it's somewhere in the Northwest. And he said he was, like 12 years old, and he had this ideal childhood. They played in the woods every day. He said one day he went out in the woods and it was quiet and got this eerie feeling. And they kind of turned this corner, and up in this tree was this huge white Sasquatch. hopped down. He said, massive, built like, a bodybuilder, but, twice as large, like hops down out of this tree and just stands there. And he said, he got the feeling that it was saying like, don't go any further. The woods aren't for you today. He said, they turned around and ran out of there. He and, two of his friends were with him. So he didn't even connect it to Sasquatch at the time. He said they just thought it was like a monster again. They call it the beast. Years go by, and he gets in his 20s and becomes interested in Bigfoot and starts, thinking back and like, oh my gosh, I think that's what it was. Contacts his friend who was with him. Actually contacted both of his friends. Now, one of them said he didn't see anything. He just ran when he just ran when the other kids ran. Now, this guy chalked that up to this kid. He said, well, this kid was always this kind of a scaredy cat and was always looking down. Maybe he didn't see anything. But the kid that was with him that did see something, he contacted him as an adult. And he says, man, remember that? And he's like, yeah, I remember that. How can I forget? He said, man, that creature was evil. It was solid black. So here two people saw, they could agree it was a creature. And one of them got this, generally like a good feeling from it. Not necessarily bad. He says definitely was like, get out of the woods. These aren't for you. But, he felt like there was something going on back in the woods. Like, I don't know. He said he didn't know if there was a cougar back there or maybe there was a homeless guy back there that would have done some harm to him or something. He said, but he just got the feeling that it was stopping them from going back in the woods that day. Like you don't go. But this other kid said it was pure evil, and with just whatever it was, was solid black. So one of them saw a white Sasquatch, the other one saw a dark black one. One of them said it was kind of protecting them. The other said it was evil, and very, very interesting. And I tend to believe that story. I think somehow, you see what you see with this, and maybe we don't always all see the same thing. I was there's an area we research that we call Site 7, just so people we don't want to give away where it is. And there's strange lights that appear there, and they're different every time. And I've taken a number of people, and sometimes they appear, sometimes they don't. But I took 4 people with me like a week and a half ago to go see him. And one person had seen him before, and I'd seen him before, obviously, several times, and the 2 other people had. And mostly we saw the same thing, but we were seeing lights at the same time. And I know at some time what I saw was different from what 2 of these other people saw. It was very interesting to kind of go over it with them. They were seeing ping pong ball sized orbs, like round orbs, and I was seeing what looked like LED pen lights at one point. So I know at least 2 or 3 times what we saw the lights in the same place. We agreed where they were very close, but what we saw seems to be different. And again, it's just a weird thing. I think it checks a box though, that somehow this is reactive and somehow you see maybe what you need to see, or you see what the other gives you. I don't know why that, we would see something different, but we did.
One thing I love about having this forum and this podcast, like you said, nobody's making money off Bigfoot. I don't do this for any kind of reason other than I love having these conversations, because like people like you, your works have really helped open my mind. I have friends that I lovingly call or refer to as squares, that don't understand my fascination with the paranormal or Bigfoot and things like that. And they're like, hey, Brian, do you believe in ghosts? And it used to be a pretty easy answer. Like, oh, sure. But now I'm like, well, what's a ghost?
Right.
What is that? We don't even have a common definition that we can agree on like what a ghost is. I mean, earlier, 40 minutes ago, you and I were talking about poltergeists in the woods.
Right.
Hey Brian, you're crazy, man. Or hey man, you see Bigfoot lately or anything? Or they joke around with Bigfoot and stuff, and I'm like, man, I don't know. Bigfoot could be, like you said, something that's a conjured concept. Bigfoot could be he could be a hairy alien. Bigfoot could be a missing link creature in the woods. Yeah, he could be a ghost of Neanderthals. I don't know.
Well, I mean, again, this is in the new book, Where the Footprints End. There's tons and tons of stories, way before we ever talked about Bigfoot, going back to Europe and so forth, and all over the world, really, about hairy ghosts. People are describing hairy ghosts. I mean, is it a ghost? I don't, and that's the other thing that I think people might be frustrated. At no point in that book, or any of my books, I think it's some of my earlier books, I was leaning towards this thing being flesh and blood. So I kind of, talk about it in those terms. But even in my first book, I'm putting out there, like, look, there's weird stuff that goes along with this. Something weird's going on here. But that said, especially in the new book, when we're covering all this strange stuff as relates to Bigfoot, no point in that book or in volume 2, because it's going to be 2 volumes, do we ever say Bigfoot is an interdimensional creature, or, Bigfoot is an alien, or Bigfoot is a ghost. We don't know. And that's the truth. And nobody knows. Anybody who tells you they know what it is, I like to say, share your work. RJ, prove it. I don't know what it is. And that's the only truthful answer I can give. So that's going to be nowhere in those books. Nowhere is it going to be like, come to the last chapter and like, so Bigfoot's an interdimensional creature, and he comes from the ninth dimension and whatever. No, that's not that. I can't tell you what it is. Only that it is.
Yeah, it's just an eternal mystery, and those are the most fun, I think, because it leads you down these rabbit holes, but it also makes you think, and that's why I really appreciate the people like yourself and others out there that don't have any preconceived notions about what is going on out there, because something's going on out there. We don't have the answers. All we have is reports and research and conversations like this to kind of open doors and not shut doors. Yeah. I at some point I went through probably a month of like a real depression about this. Probably after I'd written my first book, sometime in there, when I realized, like, I'm not going to solve this mystery. I don't get to solve this. And I kind of, just got depressed for about a month and didn't do much. And finally, at the end of that time, I literally sat myself down. And I thought, well, okay, you're not going to solve it. Like, you're not going to be the guy that solves this. But are you interested in it? Yes. Do you want to keep pursuing it? Yes. Do you enjoy it? Yes. And just had to come to this final conclusions, like, okay, I just have to like sit with the mystery and just enjoy that aspect of it, and realize, like, this doesn't get solved because nobody's rolling a body. They can prove me wrong by rolling a body into a lab, but it's not going to happen. I mean, it's just I'd be willing to bet anything I own on that. We've had hundreds and hundreds of years to discover a body, and it just doesn't happen. And those people that have claimed to shoot it and possess a body in one way or another, or capture it, 100% of the time those bodies are gone. Yeah.
We do not have access to those bodies. Either they forget where they buried them, or the creatures come out of the woods and reclaim the dead, or some mysterious, black helicopter or black van pulls up and takes them away.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever the reason, and the bodies are gone. We don't have access to them. So, I'm very, very confident that we're not going to get a body of a Bigfoot ever, and it may be a mystery that we always have with us. But I'm fine with that. I quite enjoy it, and I feel like there are hints in folklore. I have some theories that are unprovable. How can I prove that it's an archetype? Like, I don't know how one would prove such a thing, but I feel like, we can get closer to the essence of it, but probably never really, really ever solve it.
I think the universe is kind of slightly, or it's just whispering clues to us, and sometimes we're not open to the clues, or we can't process them, and we don't understand what what the universe is kind of revealing to us. It's just kind of, we're not going to solve these mysteries. We just kind of have to be a witness to them.
Yeah. It's part of being human. Like we don't get all the answers. I think that's and the answers we do get usually lead to a lot more questions.
That's good. We got to question those answers, Yeah. In the time that we have remaining, if people, and I know they've enjoyed this conversation, if they want to hear more from you, your podcast is Strange Familiars, and you have, let's see, how many books? I'm thinking you have 5, 6 books that are available.
It's 5 books. It's 4 of my own, and then the most recent one I wrote with the co-author Joshua. So,
nice.
Beyond the Seventh Gate is my first one. Then I did the 2 historical Bigfoot books, Bigfoot in Pennsylvania, Bigfoot West Coast Wildmen. Then I never thought I'd get enough stuff to come back and write a second book on Toad Road, but enough people contacted me after writing the first book where I had a bunch of witness accounts, and I added my own experiences in the area to that. And I wrote a second book called Don't Look Behind You, and that covers more of that. And then the new one is Where the Footprints End, Volume 1, and we should have Volume 2 out before the end of the year, probably looking towards Christmas.
That was my next question. I was like, I just finished part 1. Where's the sequel? Come on, let's get it done.
Yeah, no, the part 1's mostly folklore. Part 2 we're calling Evidence, just to give it a sort of a rough title. It goes into a lot more like strange Bigfoot cases. Not that there aren't plenty in Volume 1. There's plenty of folklore also in Volume 2. But in general, there's things like disappearing evidence in Volume 2, and we talk about the weird trackways, strange number of toes. A lot of these tracks have 3 toes, which should not be on a primate. Mm-hmm. Trackways that end in the middle of the field, and we talk about things like that. I talk about the stick sign phenomenon, what people call stick structures or hex signs. Well, I call them hex signs because I believe they may be of spiritual in nature. They may be possibly even magical, like 3-dimensional sigils. And so I have a chapter on that. So it goes more into like the actual like, kind of physical evidence of the creatures. I have a large chapter on the weird lights associated with the phenomenon and so forth. So plenty of folklore in Volume 2, but not as like Volume 1 is like very much concentrated on the folklore. Volume 2 is more on like the evidence kind of stuff. So that will be before the end of the year, hopefully.
Nice. I showed my friend a copy of Where the Footprints End, and he's like, "Man, that cover's great." I'm like, "Yeah, the author drew it, and you're also an accomplished illustrator."
Oh yeah, I'm people really like that cover. I had to really bring it because I think for me this book feels like I was saying it was going to be my Bigfoot mic drop, but it's not. I'm going to write more on Bigfoot. I know I am. Like as I'm writing Volume 2, I'm like, oh, there's so much more I want to say. But I felt like it was going to be my last book on Bigfoot, at least for a while. And I thought, I have to make it really special. So I'm real proud of that cover. So I'm glad people are liking it.
Now, do you have formal art training? Because it's quite the cover.
I was an art major in college, but I taught myself how to do pen and ink pretty much. I was always fascinated with it was actually Bernie Wrightson's Frankenstein. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Sure.
Yeah, the wonderful illustrated version of Frankenstein I got when I was a kid, and just saw it I think in a comic book shop and bought it and just was like, whoa, what is that? How did he do that?
Mm-hmm.
And pen and ink, and became obsessed with pen and ink. So I kind of developed that skill on my own, just from obsessively drawing. But I was an art major in college, for whatever that's worth. I think that degree gets you a handshake and an application to McDonald's.
And on top of everything else, you're a musician with at least a dozen CDs under your belt.
Yeah. I like to say I do. I write paranormal books, and I do paranormal artwork, and I make paranormal music. I tend to kind of make the full do the full Monty there. So yeah, I've been I kind of learned for whatever reason. Like I said, I grew up in the punk scene, and in my 20s, a girlfriend bought me an acoustic guitar. And I really became fascinated with folk music. I feel like my ears wore out a little bit. And I still enjoy, a lot of punk and stuff, but a lot of heavy music I enjoy, but I don't know how to play rock and roll. I kind of taught myself how to play folk guitar, and then wanted to learn banjo, and found a local guy who taught me clawhammer banjo, kind of very traditional style banjo, which I've learned in a very traditional way because I basically stared at him playing until I got it. He showed me more than he taught me, but it ended up being a good thing because it's really, again, part of the folk process. I think that's how people learned.
Nice.
Originally, and I've been lucky. I had a career as a musician. I still making music, and I very much enjoy it, and I'm glad. I think more people have found my music probably through the podcast and the books than ever found than the other way around. I'll say that. But I'm happy. I'm happy for it.
Fantastic. I knew today when I got up, I'm like, man, I got this interview tonight with Timothy Renner. I was really looking forward to it, and it did not disappoint. What a great conversation. Everybody.
Thank you.
It's been just a great a privilege to share some time and to speak and listen to Timothy Renner. And you can go back and listen to us 2 or 3 times, I'm sure, and you'll probably get something different out of it every time. Hope we opened your mind on this episode of the Necronomicast. Tim, thank you so much for being on the program, and my best to you. And I hope I hope we have that paranormal crossroads sometime where our paths meet.
Absolutely, I'll come back anytime. Thanks.
Fantastic. Everybody, thanks for listening to this episode of the Necronomicast. Wow, that was a good one. I want to thank Timothy Renner for being a part of the show. We've got links on the website. Also, where you listen to podcasts, how you can get a hold of more information, books, and the like from Timothy Renner. Now, if you've got crazy stories, have you seen a ghost? Have you seen a UFO? Have you yourself seen Bigfoot? If the answer to any of those questions is yes, I want you to give the show a call. Don't be afraid. Don't be scared. I'm not going to think you're too crazy, but I need you to call 402-431-2850. That's the Necronomicast hotline. Again, 402-431-2850. You can find that phone number on our website as well. I need you to call in with your true, bizarre, paranormal, weird story. Record it on the show voicemail, and I'll put it on the show. That's all you have to do. We've got some crazy shows coming up. We've got some true crime coming up. A certain New York Times best-selling writer is going to be on the show. And as always, we are broadcast from Omaha, Nebraska. This is episode number... Which one is this? Number 183, copyright 2020, the Necronomicast. Thanks for listening, everybody. Now get some sleep.